tell you what, since we are at the top of the hour, Gary, if you'd be so kind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Vernon, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us over here at the City Club, Breakfast Club, coming to you live typically from Los Angeles, but now coming to you live from all over the world. Very excited to be with everyone that's this morning. What we do is we aim to help entrepreneurs and corporate executives grow their business through two ways. One is through education, the other is through networking. Through education, what we do is we host thought-provoking educational forums where entrepreneurs and corporate executives can gain knowledge and insight on trends that impact life, business, and community. And what we want to do is we want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to come out and meet the people, learn more about each other's business, and help grow each other's business. And so I'm very excited to open up the meeting this morning. We've been coming to you live for many, many years, and very excited for all the work that Vernon and Mitch and everyone that's part of the committee that puts into this. So I'm going to hand it back over to Vernon. Vernon, it's all yours. Thank you for allowing me to open up today.
Thank you very much, Gary. You know, I enjoy this time spending with the Breakfast Club because I have the privilege of working with just an absolutely stellar committee of participants, people that I know I can go to and count on. Just to let you know who's with us, of course, we have Mr. Mitch Woolley from eMarketing Associates. We have Ms. Denise Anthony, Title Guru, Mr. Gary Martinez from Asheville Associates, Senior Vice President, and Ms. Margaret Brown from Socialize LA. Unfortunately, Ms. Margaret Brown is not with us now. And I am Vernon Webb with Webb Group Leadership Development. So that is the Breakfast Club Committee, those people who are responsible for making sure that this event goes through smoothly. And so with that, I will introduce our speaker, Renee. I asked Renee to speak to the Breakfast Club because Renee, outside of the fact that he's just out there, he's an alumnus of UCSD. He earned a BA in marketing and an MFA, and I'll have to ask him what that is, in visual arts with a focus on communication arts. For more than 2 decades, so now we're dating him, Renee has specialized in producing visual branding content, photos, and videos for clients of advertising and marketing firms, which has yielded actually editorial production for Budweiser, Banana Republic, J. Crew, Sephora, just to name a few. Since 2016, Renee has been working with local businesses in Southern California from anywhere between 1 and 500 employees in assisting these firms to create impactful visual vehicles which propel their marketing plans. So without any further ado, Renee Ferris.
Howdy, howdy, folks. Thank you much for the intro, Vernon. To go back to your MFA question, that's Masters in Fine Art. So, yeah.
I'll consider myself educated on that.
And I'm assuming I can share my screen here. Is that correct?
You can if you wish.
Cool. Well, I always like to also talk a little bit about my background, a little further than what Vernon mentioned. In that a lot of times people, when it comes to arts, an art form like photography, for a lot of people, it's a hobby. It could be a hobby for 50 years. It could be a hobby for 10 minutes. You know, it's a hobby for a lot of people. So what I always like to talk about is a little bit about my background. So a lot of times people ask me, you know, obviously see my age in my 50s and say, well, you know, you weren't doing, if you've been doing photography for a few decades or a couple decades, you know, what were you doing beforehand? So before photography, I entered the photography realm professionally in February of 1996. However, prior to 96, from 89 to 96, I was a U.S. Army combat medic. So I was served with the U.S. Army as basically a nurse in the field. Saw a lot of deployments all over the world. Prior to even that, because people will also ask, well, kind of a nursing or combat medic or that type of service is completely different than photography, which is true. However, what people don't know is that the photography bug grabbed a hold of me when I was about 8 years old. So it's been a while. It wasn't just something that happened out of the blue. And so growing up in the 70s and early 80s, one of the things that was always intriguing to me is my mother always had these women's magazines laying around all over the house. And one of the things that I loved about the magazines was the ads. So the advertorial work that was done in print ads at the time were always mesmerizing to me. They were always pretty amazing. So I always loved the art, that side of the art versus the family portraits. You know, I was always a kid making the funny faces in the family portraits. I was always a kid getting in trouble all the time because I was making all these funny faces. And so, with that said, over time, I just started to really love photography from the area of producing artistic photos. Eventually, even more so, I loved producing photos that produced an interest from the consumer or the potential consumer, which is where we get the word communication arts from. So there's different types of photography. There's in the business world, there's primarily advertorial and commercial. They're two completely different aspects. And what I do mostly is advertorial, though I do some commercial work as well. So we'll talk about that as well as we go down the line here, but let's talk about visual assets and what that looks like for a company. So let me start. Here we go. So I hope everyone can see my screen. Everybody good? Yeah. All right. Cool. Cool. All right. So visual assets, when it comes to being a company, which I think we all either own a company or self-employed of some sort. So a visual asset is what we call a design work, which is can be anything from a web design to other forms of design work for advertorial placement. Photography, video, headshots, logos, so on and so forth. So one of the reasons, a lot of people ask me, why do you call it a visual asset? Why that word asset? So as we go down the road, I'll explain a little bit more about that as to why I call things an asset. So let's go to the next slide. Let's see here. All right. So when we talk about assets, quite frankly, there's only two ways to obtain an asset. It's either a purchase or gift. So some, inheritance would be a gift, a house or what have you. A purchase would be something we obviously pay for. And then over here on this side, I talk about investing. So one of the things that I look at when we're looking at producing imagery for your marketing is purchase. So if you purchase something, I look at the fact that when I purchase something, generally, it's going to go down in value. Whether I purchase a car, even a camera, it doesn't matter what I purchase for my company, it's going to go down in value if I don't look at it from an investment standpoint. So going back to a car, going back to a camera is only worth, it's only in business, it's only worth what I use it for, right? To generate income. So when we're developing imagery in the area of marketing, what we're looking for is to produce imagery that instead of you purchasing, you're investing into, because then you're going to have a return on that investment. So a lot of people ask me again, when it comes to investing, like how do we look at that? Like, what do we do with that? So I'm going to just give a quick example of a company which most of us would know, which is called Sears Roebuck, or Sears, right? Everybody knows Sears. And so when the company was Sears Roebuck at one time, eventually Roebuck sold out to Sears. And when that happened, the asset base was not the inventory they had in Chicago, which was part of that, but it was the inventory in Chicago. It was all their other assets that they had in investments in because they did invest in other companies as well. But a lot of things were also the actual imagery that they used for catalogs, right? So back in the day, we used to buy through catalogs a lot of times, right? Mail order catalogs, so to speak. Today we do it online. But all those imageries, all those images, all that illustration, all that copy work that was done for the marketing side was part of the assets that were sold to Sears by Roebuck. It wasn't just the name. Okay, so it's important to understand that when you develop, if you're a company that would eventually sell your, your company, it's important to understand that developing the asset is so important. So your imagery could be a very valuable asset value to the company. Okay, so we look at everything from that perspective, at least on my end. We look at your marketing plan. We look at how can we develop your imagery to become an asset rather than a purchase that degrades in value. I hope that makes sense. And I'll definitely be taking questions at the end. So here's, this is actually an attorney client of mine. And so she wrote to me at the end of last year. We did actually all her branding work. So we took a look at her marketing plan. We took a look at everything back in October 2019, produced everything in December 2019. And so a year later, she wrote to me asking me for some other things. She needed some updates. And so we talked, and her email says, this part of her email says, I am also writing because my 3 new marketing people, so she went through a change there in a year, love your work. They say it's great and professional, great quality, and here's the key, a great investment. So they started to see why there was value, not only in the money spent, but value in the actual imagery. So the imagery was becoming something much greater than just a pretty picture. Hope that makes sense. So visual assets in a nutshell are both photo and video. So you take a look at your marketing plan, we'll just talk a little bit about that in a second. And then we develop these assets for this. The important part about an asset for a company is that we want it to be this, income producing, which means that if it's used for an ad, if it's used for social media posting, if it's whatever exposure you're using that image for, we want to make sure that it becomes income producing. The way it becomes income producing is through the keyword that Vernon mentioned, was communication art. So communication art is something that happened back in the 60s. The Mad Men era, back in the 60s in advertising, was developing imagery and illustration that created a buying thought or buying mode or buying emotion for the viewer. Okay, so that's how when we develop imagery, that's what we're looking to do, is develop something that is going to cause a trigger in the viewer to say, I want to talk to this person. I want to talk to Gary. I want to talk to, to this wine connoisseur, Miss Sanders, that's what they want to do. So they start to engage in that way. And that's how it becomes a return on investment. It becomes an asset, becomes something that's of value rather than, again, a pretty picture. In that process, when we're talking about marketing plans and whatnot, a lot of times a question is asked is, who are you? So a lot of people give a definition of who they are, like, I am a realtor, I am a this, I am a that, defining themselves as the job that they do. But I like to take it one step further. I like to say, you are not what you do, you are why you do it. So Gary, I believe, I'm sorry, I did click the wrong one. So Gary is a master commercial realtor, right? Right.
That's right.
Okay, so Gary, there's some reason why you do what you do. I don't know what that reason is right this second, but there is a reason for it. Whether it's investment dollars or whether it's an emotional reason, whatever the reason is, that's what you want your client base to translate to. You want to translate that in visuals, whether it's video or photo, and you want to help them understand that, so that you don't necessarily have to say why, but you do have to express a why, so that your client base will turn that around. When I worked with Mina, who mentioned that she's a client of mine, when I worked with Mina, that was an exact thing that we went after, is producing new imagery, producing a new brochure that talked about her why. Okay, so again, all this is part of your marketing plan. So in your marketing, you should identify and define your why, And it's not a mission statement, guys. A lot of people say, oh, we have a mission statement. That's all we need. No, it's not a mission statement. It goes way further than that in marketing. So we talk about the why, we identify it, we define it, and then we produce imagery for that, if that makes sense. Now, this is again talking about, a lot of people will tell me, well, you know, we're a corporation, or we're this, or we're that, you know, this seems more like personal branding. The answer is that is true. However, personal branding, though it's a new buzzword, has been around for decades, way before I started working in this field, for sure. And here's one of the guys that brought that to market. You guys know Men's Warehouse, okay? This guy used to come out in the 70s on newspaper ads and then TV and what have you and say, you're gonna like the way you look, I guarantee it. So this gentleman took his why, meaning his story is that he understood and that men have a hard time shopping, right? He had a hard time shopping and he wanted to look good. He wanted to look good in his meetings. He wanted to look good here or there, what have you, but he had a hard time. So in creating the story of why, his whole process was that men want to look good. They want to look good. They want to show up and look good, not just, you know, in board meetings. You know, they want to look good everywhere they go. And so this was his part of his why statement is you're going to look good. You're going to like the way you look, and I guarantee it. So that's part of that process, is understanding the why and not necessarily having to say why. I mean, Dr. Sanders loves wine. We know that. There's a why behind that. You know, whether it's a health benefit or otherwise, there's a why behind that. So that why is huge, okay? So now we go into, everybody, I don't know how many of you have heard of GoodRx. I'm gonna show a quick video of GoodRx and what their why looks like, to be honest. So let me go back here. And for some reason, every time I get out of this screen, it goes to you guys. So let's go there and let's go here. So this is a 30-second video. Now this is the CEO of GoodRx.
Most people don't know that pharmacy prices vary wildly and that insurance isn't always your best bet. GoodRx is an easy way for Americans to save up to 80% on their prescriptions. You type in the name of your prescription, you find a coupon, and save. GoodRx works at virtually every pharmacy in America. This year, we'll save Americans over $1 billion on their prescriptions. There's no membership required with GoodRx. It's totally free, and we don't need any personal information. Go to goodrx.com to see if you can save on your prescriptions.
This is a very simple video. This company is 10 years old. Well, actually, it was 10 years old, 2019. But it went from these three guys opening it up, 10 years, and then we're talking about 10 years later, in 2019, they recorded a revenue of $388 million for that year. They went public last year. So,
Hey, Renee,
yeah.
just to let you know, we didn't see the video. We just saw the slide that has the picture on it.
All right, well, I'll show you the video again. And so the important part here is to understand that using personal branding, the CEO of the company gets on video, has background things going on, talks about the company, talks about himself a little bit in what the purpose is of what they do, turns around and lots of ad dollars obviously spent, but turns around and starts generating a crazy amount of money. So I think that, you know, when it comes to personal branding, it's part of corporate as well. It's not just, you know, it's not all about the individual for a one-time
Most people
type deal.
don't know that pharmacy prices.
Can you guys see this video? No? Well, I am sorry. I don't know why it's not coming up.
I think you have to share a different screen.
Maybe.
Might have to share the video pop-up.
Yeah, I don't know.
We still see your keynote presentation.
That's fine. I'm gonna put it for you guys for future reference. I'm gonna put it in the chat in a little bit.
Renee, all we see is his image and GoodRx, but it's just a still. It
That's
doesn't.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
I
are
don't know
seeing
why
first
it's not
page.
playing. Yeah. I've done this presentation, I don't know how many times, and it always works. So I don't know what's going on here. Let me go back here and let me go back here. All right, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat so that you can at least see it, refer to it later. But this company has been using this method of marketing, meaning taking the personal branding approach for their CEO and corporate, and just created a wonderful message around it for 10 years, and creating a crazy amount of growth as well. From going from 3 employees to 200 employees in the course of 10 years, that's growth. That's some serious stuff. So at the end of the day, one of the things that we look at is take a look at your marketing, take a look at who your target audience is, and then match your visuals to that target audience. So it may not be a bottle of wine, right? That might be part of it so that you have some type of e-commerce, but the real story is, maybe somebody enjoying a glass of wine, somebody doing other things with a glass of wine, Gary showing a commercial property, that kind of thing, Mitch, on a Zoom call, doing some form of meeting or what have you. There's just all kinds of different ways to explain the why and how to target your audience with a visual image or video. So it's really, really important to just hone in on that why message. So one of the things I like to talk about real quickly is, okay, we all know what a Tesla is these days. And I quote here, Tesla will not go without the proper fuel. And what I mean by that is this. Let's look at your marketing plan, your target audience. Let's look at that as your Tesla, right? And so if you have this marketing plan, this Tesla, are you going to take the Tesla down to the Shell station to get gas, petroleum? The answer is no, of course not. You're going to plug it in, right? You have to give it the right type of fuel. The same thing happens with your marketing plan, guys. You got to give it the right type of fuel. You got to break it down. You got to figure out who your target audience is, who you're speaking to, who you want to service, those kinds of things. Talk about your why, and then turn around and create imagery that's going to propel or be the fuel for your marketing plan or your Tesla. A lot of times people say, "Oh yeah, I got all my branding, in place. I have a headshot or I have a logo," and I'm like, "Okay, that is not like your marketing plan is going to go nowhere quick." One of the things I like to talk about here is what I didn't talk about in the beginning is even though I came into the photography world and started working actually I was an intern for a commercial photographer for a couple of years, actually. One of the things that I don't talk about too much is that I was actually with New York Life Insurance Company for 2 years. Learned a lot about finances, learned a lot about investing, learned a lot of things. But during the time I was going to school, learning photography, learning all this other stuff, I was also a New York Life agent. And so in that, my whole idea was to talk to people, business owners, about what? About commercial insurance, about key life insurance for their employees and whatnot. There's just all kinds of stuff that insurance companies have, all kinds of products. So what I did is, I'm sure all of us remember the little thing called a DVD. So what I did is I created 3 presentations, a 30-second, 45-second, and a 60-second presentation or talk in reference to commercial type of insurance for businesses. And so that my whole marketing plan was, I want to talk to businesses because that's who I gravitate towards, right? That's who I like to talk to. And so part in that process of all of this, I would talk about that DVD. I would give it to people, go to whatever meetings I would go to, Chamber of Commerce and what have you. I would give this DVD out. In that DVD, that was my fuel. That was the fuel of my marketing plan. Me talking to them about the potential of protection for this, protection for that, creating, a talk. And so that was my marketing plan. That was my marketing plan to do that. And my fuel was the DVD with my presentation. So it's important to understand that you got to kind of wrap these things up into that visual content to go with your marketing. So bringing this up, closing this out to brand awareness, is the planning process is the most important process on this, guys. As we all like to say, you can't build a house without a foundation, right? So you got to have a strong foundation. So part of the process would be identity, the why, the visual planning, and then utilization. How are you going to use these photos? How are you going to use these videos? Who are you going to target? Those kinds of things. So all this put together is how you create a successful marketing plan and the fuel that goes with it. or
Renee, are these pictures your pictures or these stock photos?
these are my photos. Yeah, everything I show is mine. Everything I show is mine.
They look like high quality stock photos. That's how good.
Well, if you go to my website, you'll see what what I'm referring to. And I'll touch base on that in a second. One stock photo series, by the way, Buzz, was used by a little company by the name of Amazon during the holidays. and I'll show it to you. I'll show it to you in a second, and maybe it was a series. It wasn't the ones I have on purpose because I want to keep that separate, but it was in that same series, and you might recognize it, you might not. So one of the things that here in closing, one of the things that I like to talk about is some of the things that people say. And in this case, this is a realtor. I mean, how much competition does a realtor have? I mean, come on, guys. You know the deal. I wouldn't even say there's a dime a dozen. There's like 30 in a dozen, when it comes to realty. But this is one of the statements that she made, is the fact that her imagery now became relatable, and she became relatable and approachable through imagery. And here was her why statement. This is a 40-year-old. I know she doesn't look 40, but her target was millennials. That's who she wanted to work with. And her whole theory and process was that she absolutely hated the fact that growing up, she had to move every couple of years. So every couple of years, her family was moving because why? Well, rents would go up and what have you. And she absolutely hated that as a kid. So that left a lasting impact. So her why was, I want to help new couples, millennials, get their first home, and hopefully they'll keep that home forever, right? It might be a forever home, might not be, but I want them to, that's my target. I want to talk to millennials. I want to talk to these folks who will probably be renting for 30 years if they don't have somebody help them. So part of her branding, part of her process is to market and target those people. So so these photos, according to her, make her relatable and approachable. So that was part of the plan. This young lady, she's a health coach, but part of health coaching for her is also product. So again, helping her become relatable to her target audience, along with branding for the company that she represents as well. So yeah, so that's visual branding, marketing. So let's just to give Mr. Buzz an example. So Buzz, this is some of my work here. So you'll see that. Here's a little bit of Budweiser. You might be able to see that. Some other stuff. But the one I'm talking about would be...
We're not seeing it. We're still seeing your presentation.
I am so sorry about that, guys. Here, let me
see. Just share the other screen. You just need to share a different screen.
Yeah, here we go. I'll share this screen. You see it there?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is again some of my work, Buzz. So you might recognize this company here.
I don't know. Rings a bell, but I'm more of a wine and scotch guy. So
yeah. There you go. Yeah. Well, that's all right. I will hold that. I will not hold that against you. Neither will Mitch, I'm sure. So. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to advertorial type stuff, branding, that kind of thing, that's all this stuff is here. So, but I will stop sharing right now, and there's some comments. I don't know what these comments are, but do we have any questions, any thoughts, any statements, anything at all?
I do, Renee. Mm-hmm. So first of all, being a marketing guy, I've worked with a handful of other photographers before. Renee, you and I have never worked together, but your work is fantastic. I just got to say that you're definitely, top of the list of people that I've worked for. I think we all probably know a ton of self-proclaimed photographers, but you've done some really amazing work. Matter of fact, I'd love to connect you to an advertising photographer, a friend of mine, who you guys might really get along great. But the question I have for you, so when you do a project for, let's say somebody wants you to come out to their company and do some, not lifestyle shots, but whatever you would call it, pictures of them working, things for their websites, and things for their collateral, that's actually them working with clients and with their, employees, et cetera. Do you charge on a per day basis, or how do you typically charge for that type of a shoot?
So my rates are all going to be project-based rates. There's a reason behind that. In the commercial arena, we don't sell we don't sell libraries of images. We sell a set number of images. But that set number of images can be 10, can be 20, can be 30, can be 5. But it's not the 5, it's not the 10, it's not even the 20. That's the process. We look at all the back end work we have to do, all the post work we have to do. An example of that is I just finished doing a personal branding corporate job with 10 images. And that job post and pre was about 38 hours of work for that one job. So, it's not only me, as Mina can attest, it's also my team of people that I work with. And so, there has to cover labor and all this other stuff. So I do price specific to each job. There are some jobs where I only have 10. Let's go with this example, Budweiser, 10 images. That's all they wanted. That's all that we focused on was 10 hero shots. That job was 182 hours of work. And so I can't possibly charge the same for the same 10 shots, if that makes sense. So, so I always base everything on a project rate. And so I take a look at the project, take a look at, once I start meeting with people, then I start talking, then I start to break things down. And I always send an official proposal to everyone so that they have a breakdown of what the cost is. So, yeah. So, any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question, Renee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you typically what work would you do in the studio versus what work would you do in the office? Does the studio more for like solopreneurs or something who don't have an office? Or would you typically go, like for my company, would you come on site? How would that work?
Okay, that's a good question. So I mentioned something in the very beginning that there's a difference between advertorial and commercial, right? So advertorial is everything like lifestyle, editorial, personal branding, anything that would be a lifestyle type of photography, that kind of thing. Commercial work specifically is product work. So anything that has to deal with a product specific, for instance, a bracelet, glasses, those kinds of things, creams. I have like dermatologists that have their own brand of creams and whatnot that are clients. So all of that work is done in studio. On the flip side of that, headshots can also be done in studio. An example of that is on Monday, I have a headshot series to do for a company that contacted me out of Minneapolis. They have a new team here in Los Angeles, and they said, we want branding from you later. Right now, we just need the headshots for our team in LA. That's all we need. That's our marketing right now, is headshot is our need. But we want to talk about doing branding in our new office once we have it built out, because they don't have a new office yet or anything. So there's a difference there. Okay, so part of commercial is headshots. Okay, a lot of people think that's advertising or that's a whole branding package is headshots. It's not. Okay, so if we were to talk about advertorial, so anything that you would want to attract a client to outside of product, then we would talk about doing it at your office. An example is this last job I did, which is April 10th. They didn't have an office. They worked from home, but they wanted to give an office feel. They wanted to give that kind of presentation. And so I said, great. So we rented a location to do that. Mina Martinez is an example as well. We rented a location to go out and do her work and present her. So, yeah.
Renee, do you find yourself doing a lot of video, or is it mostly photography?
That's a good question. I know that some of you here are in the marketing space, e-marketing in particular. And so what I will say is that video has a lot of pull for social media posting. However, it does not have a lot of pull for websites and other forms of advertising. Actually, photos have more pull. So I have a tendency to be about an 80-20, which is 80% photo, 20% video. I'm starting to push a little more into the video arena, pushing more like 30 to 40%. But that's also based on the fact that we're doing more commercial style video, similar to what the GoodRx stuff is going to be. And I'll link that here. But it is definitely something that I think that a lot of companies
Most people don't know that
are starting to realize that photo is actually better for their SEO and better for advertorial type of things that they're doing. So, you know, unless they want to spend a lot of money on TV. So,
so Renee, because I think one of the things that I may in the future be interested in, obviously I don't have anybody, I've only got one person back in the office now, but when the whole team returns to the office, it's kind of the lifestyle stuff. It's like shooting people in their natural environment and having meetings and doing you're doing flow charts and stuff like that with sticky notes on a whiteboard, you know, right, for website builds and things like that. But those are things that I think could really, because when I'm looking at this real estate salesperson from Keller Williams that you do the shots of, it really, and she put it greatly, you know, it kind of humanizes her. Exactly. Because it's one thing when you talk to somebody on the phone, but when you see somebody in an element where they're actually, it's kind of like an quote unquote action shot, you know, that really, really seals the deal.
Yeah.
And I think because in our business, you know, we have, most of our customers are not in Los Angeles. Most of our customers are out of state. So it's pretty much a Zoom call. And right, that's about it, but there's nothing in a natural environment. And that's why I think the office would be a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I would take a look at for you, because that is something that is absolutely needed in humanizing the process. The same thing, I mean, the same thing happens with product. An example of product would be like eyeglasses, right? Let me share my screen so I can give you an example of what I'm talking about. So looking at an example when it comes to product work, you can have an image of just the product itself, right? For e-commerce type of sales. I talked about wine earlier, but it could be anything. But it doesn't do a lot unless the person is specific. It doesn't do a lot for them, right? What does a lot for them is something like, in this case, you know, sunglasses. Ted Baker out of London. So this is a client of mine. Some of you may know the brand, some of you may not. And so, you know, rather than just doing glasses, we did more than that, right? We actually, he didn't want me to do the glasses, or I shouldn't say he, but specifically the person who was my contact was a he. And he said, no, we want lifestyle. We want editorial. We want that advertorial stuff. We don't want just the product work. We can do the product work here in-house. That's not what we want. So here I went through the whole process of humanizing the product, right? What does it look like on somebody's face? What does it look like, you know, out at the beach? What does it look like? You know, we did a long series, but that's part of the process. And so I think that you hit the nail on the head. We talked about humanizing, because that's such an important part of the whole, tying in personal branding with corporate branding and making it an advertorial piece versus just a commercial piece. Yeah. Go ahead, Mina.
Thank you, Renee. You know, when I hear humanizing, it takes a different approach for me. And I think that being in the STEM industry, where I gravitate more in my presentations and in doing dining tutorials, a video has been highly recommended that I show more of. You know, whether my little iPhone or if it's going to be professional, it's a whole different thing, which we still have to do that part. And I think it speaks a lot, because to the youth in particular, they're into that. They want to clip on a video, right? So I get that part of it too. So my question to that too is there any difference in the legality of a photo and in a video shoot? Because if they get shared, is that okay? Because they'll start seeing it. So I don't know what kind of copyright you have to that. So maybe you can educate us all on that.
Yeah, that's a great question when it comes to copyright. So what I do, there's different types of copyrights. There's what we call inclusive and exclusive. And so the difference is that if I license the imagery or video, just call it imagery, because that's really what it comes down to on either side. If I license that out as exclusive, that means that only you as the business can share it. Now, if it gets reshared by a third party that has no association with you, then that's okay. That's acceptable. Okay. However, if let's just say, Mina, that you had, you're holding up stemware from a stemware company. Let's just say that, right? In your branding video or photo. And then you turned around and sold the rights for that company to use your image in that video. Now that becomes a problem. Okay. So, because now you don't have permission to do so. So it's exclusive for you and your company use only is one term. And then the other term would be you can share with anybody. So when I did the Budweiser images, I didn't do exclusive to Budweiser because I knew they were going to be sharing it with other vendors. And so I turned around and changed the licensing for that so that they had the right to go to other vendors and other vendors could use their imagery as a non-third party. And so pricing escalated, obviously, for that reason. But at the same time, it is a copyright issue that we see that all the time, actually. I've had images stolen from my website and wound up on a calendar in like China and India. And so that, that was a copyright issue. And so we had to go after that company, especially because these were celebrities. So that was a real problem. But yeah, it's a good question. And really, it's just a difference of the different types of licensing releases that can be done. So
Thank you.
yeah, I often talk about that when I'm at a pitch meeting. So I'm always talking about usage. I'm always talking about how are these going to be used. Like one of the last slides said utilization. So that's part of the utilization process is how are these going to be used? Who's going to see them? Are they going to be reshared? Are they not going to be reshared? And that goes right back also to something that Buzz asked about was pricing, So I look at that as well, Buzz, as in the commercial arena, we have to look at that, the copyright issue. So, yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Renee, a question about that usage again. So just to clarify, so when you said usage, like sharing, so for example, if we put something on social media, okay, and then someone else shares it, that's okay because we were the one that first put it out there. But it's not for us to hand to a client or something and let them do what they want with it, right? It's right. Basically just sharing and then somebody sharing off our share, correct? Right. Okay, I just want to make sure. Yeah, we've had, over the years, we've probably had 50, been sued 50 times for copyright infringement. And most of the time they don't get any money, but sometimes we give them go away money just to make them go away.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy. So we're very, very, I mean, everything we do is royalty free with licensing, with sometimes there's attribution. I mean, depending on what we're using, but we always get it in writing. So, well,
there's also the fact that depending on your photographer or whoever is doing video work or what have you, they have a right to license the work as well, or through the Copyright Office in Washington. Yep. And that's something that every single image and every single video I've ever produced, guess what? Yeah, the Copyright Office knows that I produced it. Yeah, yeah, and so that's an important part of the process. I mean, this is something that's been problematic since the internet has exploded, 15, 20 years ago. When it truly exploded, it was probably in 2008, because that's when we really started to have problems in the world of imagery. And so it's important to note that, though. And so I always talk about that. Even just recently with the headshots that I'll be producing on Monday, I talked about the difference between the licensing and who I'm going to license. An example for them, I'm licensing the company. I'm not licensing the subjects. So the subjects, if they want to use, say they leave the company and they want to use those images, they have to go through the company in order to get permission from the company, because I've already licensed it. I've released it to them. So.
Yeah. Renee, one of my very early clients, and this would have been about 2008, early 2008, came to me and needed me to redo their website because their previous web developer had gotten all the images from Getty Images. And so, the website probably had 30, 40, 50 images on it from Getty Images, and they got a very nasty, you owe us quite a bit of money letter. And yeah. So that was one of my first jobs, was recovering from a licensing problem with images.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things also is that when it comes to website development, one of the things that's so important is to understand that everyone that uses stock imagery, if you use more than a couple of images, like 3, I think it is, you're going to get dinged by Google and other search engines. They want to see original art. Like they know about all the stock images, right? They want to see original art, whether it's video or photo, and that actually helps ranking quite a bit, actually. And that's something that's been going on for years, but people don't really pay attention to that. You know, they're just like, oh, we'll just pull this image for like $10. You know, we'll use it for a little while, and don't realize that they're getting dinged unless they're doing direct marketing to their client base or to target audience. They're going to get dinged by Google and every other search engine out there, because Google is a standard and everybody follows Google. And so original art is huge. I mean, remarkably huge. So,
Renee, what happens if you get dinged by Google? Will they shut you down?
They don't shut you down, but let's just. I like what Mitch says, that the best way to hide a dead body is on page 2 of Google. so think about your website showing up on search engines, but showing up on page 10 or page 5. You know, you're not going to see anything. You're not going to see any traffic. So that's the biggest problem with it.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, that's a big issue, to be quite honest, and a lot of people just don't realize it. Buzz, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, Renee, I know you do some product photography as well, obviously. Is that something you like to do, or do you prefer to do the lifestyle shoots?
Yeah.
When I say product photography, I mean like just the product, not necessarily on a model or whatever.
Right. I like anything that earns me a paycheck, to be honest, you know. But if I have from a complete creative standpoint, I prefer to work with people as my subject. I don't mind doing. I mean, there's times like last year I did quite a bit of commercial or product work because I had to earn a paycheck. And so it was okay with me to do so. But at the same time, a lot of those types of projects, my problem is that people won't allow me to get creative. Like they just want a picture of just a bottle or just this or just, you know, and I'm just like, I want to, my creative brain is so active that it wants to create some remarkable stuff. And I just am not allowed to, you know? And so that's my problem with that, but I would still do it. I wouldn't have a problem with it. You know, I don't push it away, but it's, you know, a lot of times I'll have a client come to me and like Ted Baker rather, they came back and said, you know, we're going to handle all of our product work. We want the lifestyle. We want the stuff that's going to bring us clients. That's what we want. We'll handle the sales once they're at our door, you know, or on our website, so to speak, right? Everything else we don't care about.
Did you get to eat all that caviar that you took the pictures of?
I don't like caviar, they tried to bribe me. Trust me, they were like, "Hey, we can give you like some caviar for a couple of extra images." I'm like, "No, I'd rather take the money."
Now, if they'd offered you wine or scotch,
now it would have been scotch. It might be a different story altogether. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
No.
I have a kind of a crazy one. This is maybe food for thought. So one of our customers got sued for copyright infringement for a photograph that I personally took. So here's how the story went. I go on a Warner Brothers studio tour, and we're going into the props warehouse or one of the sound stages or something. And outside, you know, they've got these mini kind of billboards that are outside of the buildings, like in all the studios and stuff, and it's promoting a TV show. It was one of their TV shows, right, on WB. And I took a picture of it, and then I gave it to one of our social media people, and she put it up on one of the customers' blogs on their website. There's a hotel. And we got a cease and desist letter from them asking, they were naming us in the copyright infringement lawsuit against the hotel. And they pulled us into it because we had created that blog article for them. Okay. So the reason that it was copyright infringement, I'm like, wait a minute, I took the picture myself.
Doesn't matter.
You know why it's copyright infringement? No, I'll tell you why. Because the actor, one of the 3 actors that was in the photo did not get their contract renewed from Warner Brothers. And in retaliation, they went back and sued for copyright infringement.
Yeah.
We didn't do anything wrong. No one did anything wrong. It was they were having a temper tantrum because Warner Brothers didn't renew their contract, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to get you." So they sued Warner Brothers, they sued the hotel, and they sued me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's
just, come on, guys.
Well, I talk about stuff like that all the time, though. An example of that would be, let's just say that we're in your office, we're doing lifestyle photos, we're doing editorial stuff, right? And all of your computers have logos, right? They have Apple logo, they have, yeah. When I do retouching, guess what comes out? All logos.
All the branding,
Yeah.
Because there's no product placement.
Right, exactly. So I could get sued for that. I could actually get sued for that. And so I always have to be careful with that as well. So I always talk about that quite a bit, you know, unless I can get some kind of permission. And sometimes I have gotten permissions for certain things. And so I don't assume that I can, because I get permission for one project, you know, like the Realtor from Keller Williams, it's okay to have Apple logo on there. That doesn't mean that I can use it for the next client and the next client and the next client. It's a one-off every time. I mean, the Color Run got sued by a photographer because they turned around and used an image that he took. He was licensed. I'm sorry. He was contracted to do the actual Color Run photo. So the real run, the real, I think it's a 5K run, the real 5K run. You know, he was contracted for that. Specific release of the photos were for for editorial, so like for not ads at all, but for storytelling, right? So online, that kind of stuff. He walks, this photographer walks into Oshman's, and guess what the billboard is for Color Run? His photo of the winning runner, right? And with his hands up, and then there's a little tiny logo on the corner of that. And it's called Nike. So the gentleman was wearing Nike shoes when he won. And so the Color One was promoting their run with a Nike logo. So Nike and them got married in some way in order for that to happen. The photographer was like, oh yeah, guess what? These were not licensed for that. These were I'm
thinking he got a payday for that.
Yeah, well, he sued for $750,000 for that one picture. And they settled at $250,000. So it's
great
for that one photo, you know, and realistically, if he had licensed, and the way it all turned out was that if he would have licensed this as a ad type of work, so out of home advertising, if he had done that, the premium would have been about $125,000 per image, and so they just doubled it and said go away. And Nike has the money, Color Run has the money. I mean, and so they were just like, yeah, fine. So they kept the image, and so in essence, they wound up buying it out through the courts process. Yeah.
I have a friend who's a bodybuilder, and he found a picture of his calf in a muscle magazine. Literally, picture of his calf. Yeah. And he's like, hey, that's my calf. I don't remember ever. And he got a couple $100,000 for, I don't know if it was that much. It probably wasn't quite that much, but he got a significant payday for the pictures of his calf that some product had used for their, you know, muscle building thing in a whole bunch of muscle magazines.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, guys, at the end of the day, I think that original art is the right way to go with any of this. One, it helps your clients. It just like, I think Good RX is a great example of a company going from nothing to a very large annual revenue, and now gone public and even more revenue now, because everything they've done is original art. There really is nothing there that is not original art to them. And that's an important factor. The same thing, I can't remember how much Men's Warehouse was sold to JOS Bank, and I don't remember how much, but it was like in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's because, again, it came down to personal branding tied in with corporate branding, tied in with product, all of it tied in together in their marketing plan to create, you know, the why statement or the why answer to the question that is not actually ever asked. You know, it's not asked. And that goes back to communication art, goes back to the Mad Men era, is that we're going to assume that this particular type of person that we're going after to be our client we're going to assume that they have a problem. and we're going to answer the question for them, and we're going to be the solve right now, and we're going to show them visually how we're going to be that first. So
Good stuff, Renee.
thank you so much, guys. Yeah. Hey, Mitch, thank you for that. So $1.8 billion. So that was what Men's Warehouse sold to JOS Bank, right? Yeah.
$1 billion.
1.8. Wow. Yeah. So, and I'm talking, and here's the whole thing, guys, is that when your visual content is tied to your marketing, it's going to, like I said, fuel that Tesla. It's going to fuel that Tesla forever. And it's going to be like, I've done things where I sell only 10 images. Like I create 10 images. That's the sweet spot, to be honest with you. When it comes to advertorial work, is 10 images. Why 10 images? Really simple. Those images get repeated over and over again with a new message. And therefore, because people are attracted, I always like to say it this way, unless someone is legally blind, they're attracted to visual content first before they're ever attracted to whatever you're saying, whatever your message is saying. So I say to people, how many times have you seen the same McDonald's Big Mac on an ad? How many times? How many times have you seen the same Starbucks coffee on an ad? How many, it's all the same, it's just different messaging. So often it's like every 2 years, a large firm will come and say, well, we want 10 new images. We have a new ad campaign. We have a new product coming out. We want 10 new images for that product. And that's it. And they'll stay on those 10 images for 2 years, 5 years, even up to 10 years on the same 10 images. So yeah. So
Renee, I have another quick question for you. So when you do a lifestyle shoot at a company office or with clients, do you say, okay, we need a picture of you doing this, or do you just say, go about your daily work and we'll take a picture? I mean, how much guidance do you give the client as they're trying to go through and get these photos done?
Okay. So that's a great question, and let's just say that I'm a control freak. So in the pre-planning process, so part of the pre-planning, there's something I'm not sure who's familiar with this, but there's something in the pre-planning process that we develop that's called a creative brief. So we take the marketing plan and we create a brief. So we create what the images should look like, who their target audience is, and who all this is, right? So we create that first. After we create that, then we create what we call creative treatment. The creative treatment is the visual content that's tied to the creative brief, and then that's tied back to the marketing plan. So when it comes to images, one of the reasons why in my offers page, you'll see the photo session be like 2.5 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. The reason for that is because we're so honed in to what is needed and what we're going to produce that we can knock it out in a short amount of time because of that process that we take. So I think Mina has experienced that with me, is that very tight, process that we keep in order to make sure two things we want to make sure of that. One, most subjects that are in personal branding, or like an example, Mina, or even the guy from GoodRx, and even the other guy from Men's Warehouse, they're not professional actors. They're not professional models. So there's only so much that they can withstand before we start to lose focus. So instead, we just hone in, tie it down, get through the process quickly and safely and as unobtrusive as possible, and get the great images.